Good morning, 7.2 and 7.3. This is Miss Lawson bringing you week 4 of our dystopian topic or a scheme of work. Hopefully you got on okay last week and you're accessing the lessons fine. I know some of you are a week or 2 or 3 perhaps behind, but that's absolutely fine. It's never too late to access this learning. We still have several weeks worth of work to go before the summer holidays, so we're not slacking. We're continuing to be, doing our very best learning. You're only a matter of weeks away from starting year 8, so let's have that really good can-do attitude. So let's just have a do now task, then we're going to recap, then we're going to progress with the lesson. It's a nice lesson. I think you're going to enjoy it. For lots of you that really like creative writing, I think you're going to really enjoy it. So let's have a look at the do now task. I would like you to think about and write down 4 settings typically found in a dystopian story. Now that could well be at another planet, for instance. It could well be in hell. It could well be in a typical suburban town, but with eerie differences. So write down 4 settings. If you need to go back and to look on your previous learning, please do. Flick back, find your pages. And all these do-down tasks are essentially recapping what we already know. And then I would like you to list 5 adjectives, which 5 describing words to describe a dystopian world, and then use Google to find the definition of pathetic fallacy and write it in your books. Now we covered this. Oh goodness gracious, probably 6 months ago in class. It was a long time ago, so I don't expect you to remember it. It's a strange term, it's a strange word. You will understand it when you see the definition. So spend 5-10 minutes Googling pathetic fallacy, coming up with those 5 adjectives and writing down 4 typical dystopian settings. Right, so recap first. It's 2 slides of recap. This person has done a lovely throw model. Let's make it nice and big for you. It doesn't necessarily look like everyone else's is going to look, but it is brilliant. I really liked it. So your word, where we had to learn and kind of pick apart, was warning. And this person has given us a definition, so a message informing of danger, and there's examples and non-examples, and she's really managed to come up with some antonyms for the synonyms she has here. So she's given examples of danger, threatening, cautioning. She hasn't given an actual example of when we got a warning, so perhaps she could have done, I don't know, like an earthquake warning or something along that line. And then she's given some non-examples, which are calm and clear and manageable. Really well done on that. And then your other task was for last lesson, and I've seen some of these people's and they are really good, so well done. You had to come up with some evidence for similarities between the 2 extracts and then differences. Now the differences, I did say, if anyone managed to do it, you'd be getting an R2. That would be no one, but that's absolutely fine because it was really tricky. And you know what, I have studied this lesson, obviously. I put this lesson together. I've also given this task to other children slightly older than you, and we've only managed to come up with 1, so that's absolutely fine. But at least it means you're picking apart a text and really thinking about it, and that is what I would like you to do, is kind of, just investigating and thinking, are there any similarities, are there any differences, because that will get you into practice for when you grow up and kind of continue your education. So the ones that I managed to find, let's have a look here. So if you have managed to do this and you've not sent it in, or even if you have, you can add to it. So the one that I'd already given you was both present the setting, presents the setting as dangerous. We had the idea of the packs of wild dogs and lone cougars and bears, and then mound of old cars, trucks piled haphazardly. So then we also came down to the settings that are isolated. So not only are they dangerous, they're isolated, because remember, these are the typical conventions of a dystopian novel or film or setting. So quote 1 from Hunger Games: enclosing all of District 12 is a high chain link fence topped with barbed wire. So again, with that idea of a fence, it makes yourself behind either side of the fence, actually isolated from whatever is on the other side. And quote 2 from Ready Player One: the giant factory farms that surrounded the city. Right, use of short sentences to create tension. I was 11 then, and bad news. And any alliteration: would, wait, and one of over. There are loads and loads and loads of examples. This has been done by a student, and they're not necessarily the ones that I would have chosen, but this is what you could have found. In terms of the differences, one is set in a rural area and other is set in an urban area, and this is why it's a little tenuous. And what do I mean by tenuous? Well, it's a little bit what I mean by stretchy. It's a little vague because We only know that because if you've read these two or seen these films, you would know that this is the case. But from the extract, you wouldn't necessarily have got that. So inside the woods, they roam freely, and carrying goods workers into the city. So the Hunger Games talks about a meadow and a field, and the Ready Player one is very urban. There's asphalt, as in that's what they put down the road, so it gets a different impression. I don't expect you to have got those though, so well done if you have managed to. And if you come up with any others, I'm still really interested, those people that are accessing these lessons further on, I'm really interested to hear your opinions and what you found. So today's lesson, let's have a look at dystopian fiction. We are going to be creating a dystopian setting for ourselves. Previously, I've managed to have you look at a picture, and what I've done, I've asked you to do is kind of look at it, annotate it, describe it, pick it apart. What did we see? We saw Michael's lovely kind of description about the tall buildings. I'd loved some lovely answers for that particular week. That was a really good week. So really now, lots of you love creative writing, so this is your opportunity. So get your pen and paper and let's get started. Now, you will eventually write your own piece of dystopian fiction, but this is going to be just the setting. It's going to be the basis for your story. So it's not necessarily going to be the whole thing today, but we're going to do step by step, rule by rule, bit by bit, and I'm going to guide you through this, okay? And by the end of it, you're going to be writing prose. We all know what we mean by setting. It's the location, time when the events take place, and lots of people forget the time when they're writing. So let's try to remember to include the time, whether it's daytime or nighttime, whether it's winter time, summertime, maybe it's in the future, maybe it's in the past. So don't just describe what you can see, but you need to remember the setting is obviously inclusive of the time. So examples of dystopian settings in George Orwell's 1984, which was one of the very first extracts we looked at through this kind of scheme of work. The world is under complete government control. The fictional dictator Big Brother enforces omnipresent surveillance, all-present surveillance over the people living in the 3 intercontinental super-states remaining after a world war. The Road, which is something we've not looked at yet before, by Cormac McCarthy, written in 2006, is a post-apocalyptic story about a father and son venturing across the ruins of America after an extinction event. They are, according to this, books and films. I've not actually seen or read The Road, but I mean, you can still see that it's happening an event. They are venturing across the ruins of after an extinction event. So again, very, very dystopian. Okay, so when developing your own dystopian setting, you should consider these questions. Who now has the power and why? And if you want to do this as I talk and you write down these answers, do it. Don't just watch this video and then go back and think, oh goodness gracious, I've forgotten what I'm doing. So answer these questions as we go. Who now has the power and why? It could well be an alien. It could well be Trump, but in a really, really terrible way, more terrible than normal. Who is the worst, the most vulnerable in your dystopian society and why? So who are, obviously someone's in control, but who is at the bottom of that chain? Who's really the most vulnerable? What still works? Could it well be the roads and the trains? And what no longer exists? And that's one of the key questions when we're looking at that picture. We were talking about what you couldn't see, and that was one of the questioning that I really wanted you to ask yourself. What actually isn't there anymore? Okay, it could well be other people, for instance. You could be the only last remaining one. It could just well be trees and greenery. What do people remember, and what have they forgotten? So is there going to be this massive event that perhaps wipes their memories, for instance, or maybe they all just talk about the massive event. Maybe no one talks about it, but they do remember it. Interesting. Maybe it's names, other people, cultural practices. Perhaps Christmas doesn't even exist anymore. And like I said, people and other places. Perhaps yours is the only island or the only country that still exists. Maybe it's just Great Britain and everyone else has just imploded out there and it's the only one that's left. I mean, it's entirely up to you. When we're looking at the next place, this is where you really start your planning. And I'm going to do some planning with you using the visualizer today. So whatever I ask you to do, I'm going to do with you. So when you are probably doing this, I really like a mind map and you well know it. So pop the dystopian setting in the middle of your page. If you don't like a mind map, that's fine. Do it in your own way. What makes it dystopian? Okay, so after you've answered these questions on your previous slides, you will have most of these answers. Post-apocalyptic, alien invasion, perhaps deadly pandemic, controlling leader or government or other. Where is it set and when is it set? And like I said, you need to remember the present day or the future. You need to remember the time stamp of it, because it gives that added context to the reader, so that they are aware that it's set somewhere different. It's not just 2020, although you could set it in 2020 if you wanted to, especially the way that this year is going. So you need to make sure that you've got the timestamp on there and what you can see, what the setting is like, and answer those questions about who is in control and who are the most vulnerable. So pop that into the middle of your page and just go around in a circle and answer those questions. If you need to go back, pause this video and go back. This is the whole point of these videos, because then you can access this as many times as you like. Right, now this is the fun part, and this is where Miss Lawson is going to take part in this. I would like you to begin drawing your dystopian setting, and I am no drawer. If anyone remembers my drawing on that whiteboard, I'm really pleased I get to teach English and not art, and you should be pleased too. So now I'm going to flip over to the visualizer and I'm going to show you what's on my page. Okay, so let's have a look. I don't want it to be too close. So, for instance, I might want to draw a building, for instance. Okay, look, my art has got marginally better during lockdown. What do you think? Oh, we're a long way actually. It doesn't help, does it? Let's turn it. There we go. And maybe in that building we could have broken windows. And maybe in the background we can just see like utter wasteland. There's literally no trees whatsoever, but perhaps we could have something on fire here, because perhaps we could have had some sort of alien. And remember, we talked about who was in control. Well, my story, I'm going to have someone who's from outer space, and they perhaps are dropping bombs, okay, which is why everything's broken. What's missing? Well, I've already said there's going to be no foliage, no greenery. Maybe we could have some, I'm going to set it for the future, so I'm going to have some sort of magic flying cars. I mean, look. You're lucky, aren't you, to have me as your teacher. Flying, so they're flying around, perhaps they're escaping. I need to obviously set the time. Now, when we don't want to tell people overtly, we want to be able to describe it as best as we can. So perhaps I will do a moon, just to be clear. Lots of you really highlighted the idea of the cloudy and dreary sky, so I'm going to make sure that in my picture, and you're going to spend a good kind of, I'd say 20 to 30 minutes doing this, make sure it's all kind of dreary and dark and grey, and however you want to convey that in your picture you can. Maybe I'm going to have some vulnerable people. Now, we said we talked about who were the vulnerable from the aliens. Well, I'm going to say we're going to have some little Samuel Ward students down at the bottom. And they're not going to look very happy. There we go. Put there. Maybe we could have Mr. Hunter. And Mr. Hunter's running. Okay, and they're running away because there's something kind of bombing. Now remember, one of the key things is about surveillance, so maybe I would like to put, maybe I could actually, yes, we could do that. Instead of making these citizens cards, maybe I could make them like the government from the aliens. So I'm going to draw a little alien here, and that can be their symbol, and they are watching, so I'm going to do a camera, and they're watching people. Okay, so just so that I know, I put some eyelashes on there. So they're watching the people. So far I know that it's barren, it's wasteland, it's broken houses, the aliens are in control. It's night time, it's cloudy, it's grey, it's overcast. There are people on the ground flying around making sure that the citizens are being controlled, and the citizens are out of standing ward and they're not very happy, including Mr. Hunter. Now, let's just carry on for 1 second and see where we're going to go with this next. And I just need to make sure that, here we go. We've got 4 pictures here that are obviously nowhere near as good as mine. I mean, let's be honest. I joke, by the way. I can make them bigger. I mean, I'm not asking for colour. I'm asking for just, you know, pencil and pen if you have those. We've got some kind of weird aliens essentially, and alien animals with legs. Let's have a look at this one here. Oh, here we go. We've got broken buildings, everything's kind of crushed in. So that would be what your picture is looking like after you have spent 20, maybe so 30 minutes. And I will apologise now for the noise that's outside. The windows are open because it's simply far too hot not to have the windows open, so you're going to put up with that. Okay, so once you've done 20 to 30 minutes of your drawing, and I want to see those pictures, then we're going to get on to the more English side, because I know you're probably feeling like, oh, maybe this is a bit of artwork. Nope, you'll be wrong. It is English. So let's have a look at how we're going to progress our picture. Right, so here are the rules, and they are rules, and by the time you've done these rules, you've completed these rules, you've followed these rules through, you are going to be a writing professional. Okay, so annotate. What do I mean by annotate? Well, label, describe, you can use arrows, try to use a ruler if at all possible. I want it to be as neat and as lovely as possible. And you can describe your picture with a range of descriptive words or phrases. Descriptive words doesn't always have to be adjectives. You can have some adverbs there. If you've got people running, for instance, how are they running, for instance, and then, or you can do phrases as well. It doesn't just have to be picture words, but you are going to do a minimum of 10 words, and there's a reason for that. I would like you to use a thesaurus. So, for instance, if you think cold, okay, so it's going to be cold. Pick up that thesaurus. Pick up your phone. Pick up your Xbox. Do they have Google search on that? I don't know. But find a device or a book that will be able to change those words into something far more elaborate, far more exciting. Okay, so once you've done that, you can change 2 of those words into a phrase or sentence using alliteration. And I'm going to guide you through this. I'm going to show you how to do it, so don't panic. Then you're going to choose 2 of your words and create a simile or metaphor using those words. And then you're going to embed that simile into a sentence. And before you know it, you will have a really lovely paragraph. Obviously, you can't just do that and it'll be a paragraph, but it's going to be the basics, it's going to be your skeleton of your paragraph, okay? So, when we're talking about devices, there are a whole range of devices. I'm going to go through a few extra, including pathetic fallacy, but I would really like you to focus on these rules for a second. So, if you get a separate coloured pen, I'm going to flip over to a different camera, and we're going to plan this together. So for instance, how would I go around describing this? Well, my words would be gloomy. So I'm going to describe the sky as gloomy. Now there's some of the words I'm going to be using here that I've already used on a thesaurus. So instead of just saying dark, I've already put dark in, and I'm going to, I've changed it to gloomy. We could have then the house, and this is where you get your pen, hopefully you're using a ruler, unlike me. We're going to have the word dingy. Love that word, dingy. See if we can focus a little better. Dingy. How about depressing? It could well be the house as well, couldn't it? Or we could actually have the fire as being depressing, couldn't we? What else could we put in here? Or I like this other word here for sky, dismal. Okay, now I am going to say the whole thing is dire. Now these are my words. I'm not necessarily going to explains these now, I would like you to be able to find these words for yourself. I don't actually want to see these words appear on your screen, on your work, if at all possible. I'm going to say that the people, the Samuel Ward students, I'm going to say they are somber, which is another name, sad and depressed. And perhaps we could have one more. Now, obviously, you've got to do 10, but I haven't got time to do all 10 with you. Let's go for Mr. Hunter is glum. Okay, and you're going to do it as neat as possible, hopefully using a different coloured pen, and find those 10 words. Right, then go back, and you've got your list of words. You're going to change 2 into a phrase or sentence using alliteration. Okay, so for instance, I have got automatically 4 words that begin with D. So I can change that into a phrase or a sentence using alliteration, couldn't I? I could have dingy and depressing. So I then can create dingy and depressing. And what else have we got? Let's change it back to the visualizer for a second. So dingy and depressing. We could even do the rule of 3, couldn't we? We could do dire, dingy and depressing buildings, and then I'm going to change it into a sentence. Okay, let's talk about the children, for instance. We could say somber. Now, where did we say they went to school? Samuel Ward. So we could put somber Samuel Ward students. So we've got S, S, S and D, D, D. Okay, that created with those few words 2 phrases which contain alliteration. Now, next task, then choose 2 of your words and create a simile or a metaphor. Okay, right, we can do that, can't we? Absolutely. So one of our words was gloomy, which we've not used. So what else is gloomy? So remember, a simile is like or as. So gloomy as a, or like a. I prefer as similes than like similes personally. Gloomy, like a thunderous cloud. And there we go, I've got a simile. Metaphors are always harder. I know you always struggle with metaphors, but if you can do at least 2 similes, that would be absolutely fantastic. Then we're going to embed that simile into a sentence. Okay. So if we have this simile, so we could say, and let's not use the sky actually, because we're already describing the sky in the simile. So let's do the mood and atmosphere. So the mood and atmosphere, gloomy, like a thunderous cloud. Now, you all have more work on your piece of paper than this, okay? You are going to end up having a really beautiful picture drawn much, much better than mine. I mean, it's not great, is it? But ultimately, it's not about the artwork, is it? It's about the words you're going to choose. So you're going to have it annotated, you're going to have lots of lovely words on there, and then you're going to end up having a simile, 2 similes, sorry. You're going to end up having some sentences. And then Once we've done that, you will be able to do the final part. So using your drawing to guide you, or the image below if you haven't managed to draw one. If you're still unsure, write one paragraph of description for your dystopian setting using that skeleton that we've just come up with. So all in all, this whole lesson is approximately going to take you about an hour and 10 minutes, because the time you've gone through the do now tasks, gone through the recap, and gone through drawing a picture, annotated, described it, and then you're going to finally get to this paragraph. And it is just one paragraph. That's what I'm going to say. The purpose of the description is to create a setting. It's not, it's not your whole picture. So your whole stories. It's just one paragraph. It's probably going to take you the extra time. There are some other lovely words here, but they tend to be utopian words. So you're going to maybe find some antonyms for those that are opposite. So what is astonishing? Well, you have to find an antonym, an opposite word for that. Now there are one or two other techniques if you really want to do the extension and really push yourself. So the bare minimum is what I've described. If simile, but then obviously a metaphor, hyperbole. What do we mean by hyperbole? Again, all of this should be in your books from when we've started. This is, the very beginning of year 7. It's using obvious exaggeration for effect. Personification. Give something human feelings to an object. Okay, really like that one. And there's a really clear example of that in Hunger Games. And you'll get to use that chart that you did last lesson as well to be able to find examples. Onomatopoeia, we'll skip that one for 1 second, where words that sound, so perhaps the little police spaceships, they zoom past or they whoosh past. And then we've got pathetic fallacy, and that is what's part of the do now task, just to recap from all those months ago. So it's a type of personification where emotions are given to a setting through using kind of the weather, essentially, or object or the weather. But what we've talked about it before, if you can imagine a typical scary film, and perhaps you've seen something on Netflix and it is typically scary, it's supposed to be scary, they're not realistically, unless they're being ironic, they're not going to have blue skies and rainbows and fluffy clouds. They're going to have that storm setting. It's going to be stormy and rainy. It's just giving that idea, that feeling of that film or book or setting to the weather. So the weather's like replicating and resembling what's going on. And again, if you're doing a love story, for instance, and you wanted to write a lovely romantic picnic, apart from a really cute scene where it perhaps starts raining, but on the whole, there's going to be green fields, lush green fields, perhaps blue sky, warm sunny days. So that's where pathetic fallacy really kicks in. So how would you embed that into your setting? Well, immediately looking at your picture, you could start off with the very first sentence describing the weather. That would be really, really lovely. If you have any other further queries about this lesson, because I have ultimately gone through everything that I think you need to do, please don't hesitate to email me. It says the 6th of July. That is not true, so I'm going to just take that out for a second. It will be due on the following Sunday from when you've seen this. It will be on Go for Schools as per usual. I would like you to do me a massive, massive favour, because I am trying my absolute best for you guys. Could you mind highlighting the language techniques that you have used, so that when it comes up onto the screen, it's so much easier, because I can't stress to you just how tricky it can be to mark your work, especially if it comes at right angles and then I can't see the screen resolution properly. So just take a couple of minutes, perhaps just put some felt tip underneath it or a highlighter. But ultimately, all I really want you to do is have that first paragraph of describing your dystopian setting. Later on in the week, there will be another video of us doing some popcorn reading. If you are interested in doing that, please just send me an email. And apart from that, I hope you all have a lovely week, and you all take care and keep safe. Okay, bye-bye.